Welcome to Wear Your Cape to Work, a podcast hosted by Project Insight. We believe that project and program managers are the real superheroes of every organization. We want you to hear their stories so you can be inspired to wear your own cape to work. Today on Wear Your Cape to Work, our guest is Charlene Reynolds, Director of the John Wayne International Airport. Charlene shares with us her remarkable journey from managing some of the most undesirable projects in the city of Phoenix to now leading cross-functional teams at one of the nation's busiest airports. No matter what role she's in, Charlene has a reputation for not accepting the status quo. She's known for volunteering for projects outside of her role and finding hidden resources that other people overlook. In fact, today, she joined us from a very menial project of flushing toilets in the new bathrooms being installed at the airport. She's amazing. We know you're going to love this conversation. Thank you for joining us, Charlene.
Oh, Trina, I am so happy to be invited to share my story on this podcast.
Well, we first met at the Greater Irvine Chamber Women of Influence event, and you were the keynote speaker there. And I was so riveted during your entire keynote talk. I mean that wholeheartedly. In fact, I know the whole audience was because everyone was approaching you afterwards. And I think it's because we all were hearing about your story, about through your whole career trajectory, that you were a person who faced project work or organizational challenges and just didn't accept the status quo. You know, it was so inspiring the way you took the bull by the horns in each of your roles, spearheading new ways of working, sometimes shaking things up from the norms and leading in places where maybe women weren't always in those traditional roles. And I think it's been the overarching theme of your career. So I'm hoping today that we can spend some time talking about your career path and how you've come to be that person of just confidently approaching what is challenges in front of you and facing it and taking it in a new twist, taking a new light, a new vantage point of the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Really want to share my story because we as women often don't have the opportunity or the platforms to share our stories. I think our stories are unique. We approach life a little differently than our male counterparts. And we are just now getting opportunities to share our story. So I'm very, very happy to be here and just share a couple nuggets about myself and in my career. And hopefully it helps someone out there.
Yeah, our audience today is project management professionals, and you've run into, many of those, I'm sure, over the course of your different career path. Where was it that you started? I know that you began in a role that you weren't super sure that you were going to like, maybe a receptionist role or administrative role.
Yeah, I started my career off as a receptionist because back in the 80s, that's what women were expected to do. The mindset, they start preparing you in elementary and in high school because there was a class called shorthand. I was taught typing.
I forgot about shorthand.
Yes. And women were groomed to be secretaries. And that was the mindset that was our value to the workplace, a administrative support role.
And how did you take off from that? Probably leaving high school, going into that role and then being like, this isn't for me. How did you find out you needed something bigger?
There's always challenges in the workplace, instances where you made a mistake taking a message and someone got upset with you. And there were just small little things where I knew I was capable and I was smarter than those folks who were yelling at me about not spelling a name on the pink piece of paper correctly. And how do I change that paradigm? And so I needed to finish my degree because it was always, well, you haven't finished your degree, so we can't give you a raise. We can't do this because you don't have that. And so every time they told me I couldn't be promoted because I didn't have something, I made sure I went and got it. And as soon as I got that certification, that degree, I'm like, you have to promote me now and you have to pay me.
Yes. I'm sure there's
That
people in our audience that are hearing you and saying, you know what, I feel like that in my workplace right now. Like, I know more than this, organization or this manager is thinking I know. And I know that I have these superpowers inside of me to use in my role. Matt, you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, the idea of more, was that really something that when you hit the workforce, that's what it was, kind of, I have this idea of, a really terrible manager over your shoulder, really kind of pointing and doing that? Or was it something that you even felt when you were kind of being groomed in these shorthand classes beforehand?
Yeah, so I really didn't think about it when I was in high school taking those classes, but I had a manager, and you always have to protect the guilty, so I'll call him Mr. Right. And so Mr. Right was going back to the days of intercoms, and he was always buzzing the intercom, you know, can I get coffee? Or my coffee's not hot enough. Can you sharpen my pencils for me? And so you really start realizing this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Sharpen someone's pencil and constantly bring them hot coffee. I have more worth than that.
Well, and I bet you've become the leader you have become, avoiding any of that kind of treatment of any employee. I mean, it's hard to believe that was someone's work condition, even at that time. You scooted off from there to the city of Phoenix. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And how are things in the city of Phoenix? How did you take on entirely different role? Were you working with different city projects?
Yeah, so it was a totally different role. So over my 20-year career with the city of Phoenix, I had the opportunity to serve in 5 different departments. And so I started off with the Phoenix Convention Center, being a supervisor over one of the management services section and learning everything possible about what they call assembly management. That's just large venues, whether or not it's a convention center and or an arena. And I've always focused on working outside of my job title. Just because I have a title doesn't mean that I can't be involved in other projects happening. Within the organization, volunteering to help someone, and then taking on those projects that people just gave up on, even though I knew nothing about it. So I had an opportunity to get into sponsorship. And right now, a lot of venues are named after naming rights, after a particular entity. And so back in the day, that was fairly new. And so I convinced my supervisor to send me to a conference to learn everything about naming rights and sponsorship, and cut the first sponsorship deal in the city of Phoenix that brought in $1 million+ for the rights of having Pepsi as the sole beverage of choice at the convention center. So just taking risks like that and raising my hand on projects that no one else wanted to do really helped me within my career.
And I remember from your talk that's basically what you did through those 20 years. Just raise your hand for those undesirable projects and really cut your teeth on some things that were super challenging. Can you maybe tell the story about the bicycle project? I don't know, it's standing out of my mind.
Yeah, so the bicycle project was very, very interesting because the mayor at the time had gone to DC and saw bike share, which was new around the country. And he came back and said, hey, I want the program in Phoenix. However, I don't want to pay for it. I want it to be brought here for free. And he gave us a timeline to get it done. And my boss at the time said, hey, you have this reputation for getting the impossible done. And so, you're it. I was voluntold. And that was just an interesting project of trying to bring something to the city for free, which was a challenge. And then the mayor announced it at his State of the City address that it was coming. And so when you,
before it was ready?
yeah. And so when you make an announcement in a ballroom of about 1,000 people, it gets real really fast. And so we were trying to get it done and we were struggling. And then as I told the story that I was trying to find someone to help me that really knew about bicycle infrastructure and streets. And there was this legend in the city of Phoenix, this guy named Joe, and he rode his bike every single day. He was a quiet guy. He would be some guy, the type of guy that a lot of people wouldn't think was social and people stayed away from. And so I was like, I need to get Joe on this project. And so bringing Joe on this project, and he was delighted because he's like, somebody in the organization is finally talking to me. And he had all the answers. And yes, Joe was a little different, but he was a phenomenal traffic engineer. And through that project, Joe became a hero once we got it done around the city. So he was no longer the legend that, the strange guy who would ride his bicycle everywhere, so he started to take center stage. And it was good for Joe, for his career and just for him personally. But he really, really helped me get that project across the finish line. So even in my office here, I have a picture of me, Joe, and the mayor when we cut the ribbon for the bike share, because I will tell you, that was a challenge. Many days I didn't think I could get it done, but together with me and Joe, and we are still friends, and Joe calls me at least twice a year just to check in. So it's just amazing what you can do. And so part of the story was that person who's sitting in the corner that a lot of people may not find value in, that may look at them and think that they're a little, I hate to say the word weird or whatever. They have capabilities that you are not aware of. You got to tap into those people, because the bottom line, it's about the end goal of the organization and bringing everyone and everyone's talent to the table.
That's an amazing remark to share with our audience. Thank you for that. I mean, and thank you for living it out. And thank you, Joe, if you ever listen to the podcast.
As a Phoenician, thank you all for our wonderful bike access that we have as far as that's concerned as well. It's really easy to see, I think, why you have that mindset because of where you started, right? And then your idea that I can raise my hand and do this, and I can help others do the same, right? Is that something that you, really try to pride yourself on as a leader, is to find those untapped resources and start utilizing them?
Yeah, and absolutely. And I just feel as we climb the corporate ladder, we have a duty to pass a baton. And I mentor females and males as well in this industry. And it is just because once, I always desired to be, in management behind the closed doors to see what happened. But once you're there, don't shut the door. You have a duty to bring as many people along with you as possible who may not have the opportunity. And so what I want to do is to continue to coach women, build them up. And so when they have that opportunity to come into the C-suite, that it's open and it's welcoming. We have to do that for one another, because if we don't, then it stops with me or whoever is in charge. And I just think that for me personally, that is a selfish act. I have to help other women come into the C-suite and become leaders.
That's a perfect segue because now you're going to move from the city of Phoenix to Sky Harbor. And if I remember right from your talk, you really did have to kick that door open to that C-suite there and make a way. Am I right?
Yeah, and that was interesting because I took a lateral transfer for an opportunity, and then several months later had uh, got a promotion to move to the C-suite. But it was funny because the door was always closed, and it was
Right.
this sacred entry. And I remember prior to arriving there, as a middle manager, having to sit in the hallway in a
My
chair
goodness.
and waiting
Oh
for
my
the
goodness.
receptionist to come and escort me into the C-suite.
Oh my.
And I know how I felt sitting in that chair as a middle manager. And so when I had the opportunity, I told my boss, I'm opening the door. I told my employees that they are welcome to come and see me 24/7 whenever I'm here. And it really changed the dynamics of the office. You started to hear laughter, people would come up, and it was just such a change, just a subtle difference of opening the door. Then we had collaboration. We had a boost in morale just by opening the
Just because
door.
the door is open. Wow. So you're
Correct.
literally and symbolically opening the door made a real difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think something to note here for everyone as well is like this wasn't 30, 40 years ago, right? This
No.
was, I mean,
Right.
give us a time frame, right? We're talking less than a decade ago, approximately, right?
Yeah. So that was about what, seven years ago. But yeah, the
Mm.
door was shut, and then the one window, they had this window cling on it, so you couldn't even see.
Oh,
Um, into the window. So we would joke. And when I was a middle manager and I was sitting there, some days I would just walk up to the window cling and press my forehead against the window just to test it to see if anyone
yeah.
noticed if I was standing there. I didn't
Here's
get
my
in.
face. Here's my face. I could just picture your face up against the window. That's so cute. Oh my
I
gosh,
love it.
that's great. And at Sky Harbor, you were there during COVID.
Yes.
And so you're shaking things up in the C-suite, making things more transparent, inviting people in, and then all of this hits. And it was quite tumultuous. Maybe tell us
Yeah.
about managing work then
That was an interesting time because
at an
we did
airport.
we didn't know what was going to happen. The airlines were freaking out. We had tenants who didn't know if they could pay their bills, and what were we going to do? The food, beverage, and retail operators. There was no one in the terminal at the time, and so shutting down those locations, and would we ever be able to open those back up? And then at the same time, I didn't share at my speech. I don't recall, but having the first person in the state of Arizona, one of my direct employees, um, die of COVID. He was the first official. So having that stress and trying to manage the people aspect, that they were terrified of what the future could bring, and just the unknown, and trying to be that stable force. You can't panic because if you're the leader, people look up to you, and so just guiding people through it. And I think I shared too, then doing something different and walking the terminals every single day and talking to employees, those folks traveling, introducing myself, because I just felt, how can I tell people, although we put in all these new safety protocols, that it was actually safe to travel if I was afraid to go into the terminal myself. And so I would spend half a day walking the terminals, greeting people, talking to employees, saying, how do you feel? And just having a listening ear. If they said they needed more gloves, they needed more masks, making sure they had absolutely what they needed. And they really appreciated that I took the time to come into the terminal, leave my office, because some people would have chosen to stay in the safety of their
Right.
office. I can't say my husband was all that happy about me being out in the terminal every day, but it's like, this is what I have to do.
Yeah, with so much uncertainty, I think that's what a lot of leaders were doing, right? If they hadn't already had their little window you couldn't get into anyhow, they were just closing it up and sealing them off because with the high travel that you have there, that's really wonderful, really.
I might be connecting dots that aren't really connected, but I think I remember when you gave the speech that you were saying at John Wayne International Airport, you were doing some very big organizational strides in the retail space. And did you pick up your affinity and your real empathy for these retailers as you worked at Sky Harbor and they faced that COVID? Some of them may be forced to close. They weren't able to work. I mean, really seeing the plight of the retailer.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we were one of the first airports at Sky Harbor that gave what was called at the time rent relief to our terminal. So typically how they pay is a minimum annual guarantee to the airport, a rent structure. And what we decided to do was to go to percentage rent. And so if they only made $100, then they would only pay us, say, 5% of the $100. So we, at Sky Harbor, we were one of the first airports in the nation to give rent relief. And that really, really helped our tenants stay in business. And then eventually the federal government came in and did a lot of, support and funding during that time.
That's amazing. I mean, I can feel your heart for the people that you work for and work with. And empathy is a really big quality that is popular to talk about and try to pick up in the project management field. If you're working as a project manager, you typically aren't someone's boss. You're really, I feel like it's like the circus master, you're just directing all the amazing things that are going on in an organization. So project management professionals all the time are, how do I get to know this person better? How do I understand this person on my team? How do I capitalize on everyone's strengths? How do I meet them where they're at? How do I find what their concerns are? And you're talking about just that thing and how amazing it is to see that that's a real leadership quality too. You're not just managing, a project or task, you're leading a team of people.
Yeah. And one of the things that I found out, earlier in my career, I used to be much more introverted. And then I had to make a real concerted effort just to walk up to someone that I didn't know and to introduce myself, because everybody has a story. There's something to learn every single day. So as leaders, then you have to spend that time getting to know everyone. So I make it a point of meeting one-on-one with every new employee at John Wayne Airport. And I meet with them on average for 15 minutes to 30 minutes, because when they see me walking around, I don't want them to feel weird, like, oh, she's the boss. I want them to see me as Charlene, the person, because we're all in this together. And so spending time with them and giving them an opportunity to ask any question that they want and getting them to see me as a human versus this, hierarchical figure.
The person in the closed door, right? Because you're not really. Yeah. How did all of the work with, the people that were renting and just generally speaking, anybody who was doing business with, the Sky Harbor, how did that transition into your next role within the Houston airport systems?
So when I left Phoenix and retired from the city of Phoenix and went to Houston, we were still in COVID. And so going to Houston, we were starting to see a lot more traffic come through, but working on some of the same protocols airports had started to rebound, but it's always about taking the lessons learned through life, and then how do they apply here? They may not apply 100%. It may be 80%. So then let me figure out that, if it's 80%, let me figure out that the other 20 and how does that apply to Houston Airport?
Oh, yeah. Like you're taking that thing that you learned, and yes, it fits here at Houston, but now there's still going to be that 20% or whatever the increment is of things that don't fit from Sky Harbor that you now have to learn there.
Yeah, and it's a constant. Not everything is the same. There are some similarities, but then it's my job to find the differences and the solutions to the differences.
Sure. So by now you're totally entrenched, though, in airports, right? We've gone from Sky Harbor, we're at Houston, and now we're at John Wayne, and you're the director of the John Wayne International Airport.
Yes.
How did that come about from Houston to John Wayne, and what were you looking forward to about that role, maybe as far as organizational work?
Yeah, and so it was really interesting because during COVID, my boss at the time, the airport director for Phoenix, decided to retire. And so I became interim, and I served for interim, I think it was about 6 months. But then when there was an opportunity to compete for full time, politics got in the way, and the city of Phoenix created a new rule. If you were interim, then you cannot compete for the permanent position. And so you talk about some of the challenges in the workplace. And so what I decided to do, did I go home and cry some tears? Absolutely, no. Because I had given everything during that period. Yeah. But what I decided to do was to continue to serve. I was eligible for retirement when they brought the new person on, that I would transition them, because what I would never do as a leader is cause dissension in the organization. So I wanted to show everybody what it looks like when you don't get something that you really want. It's how you show up the next day. So I showed up with my head held high. I welcomed the new director, transitioned him, and then after 3 months, made a decision that it was time for me to go and find my path of being an airport director, because during that time, I knew I could lead an organization. I showed that I could lead an organization. So it was time for me to have my own airport. And so I went to Houston because the director there was known for mentoring employees. And then many of his executive staff went on to lead airports. Didn't know. 6 months into it, I would start getting phone calls because of just people knew me in the industry. They knew what I did in the industry. And so I was building this reputation as this great leader. And I had 3 different interviews with 3 different airports and was a finalist for all 3. But I really wanted Orange County. And so when Orange County called, I was so excited to accept the position here.
That is tremendous. How that's like getting, scholarship offers all across the country for your athletic performance. That's super great to be recruited from your leader. I mean, I'd recruit you. I know Matt would. We both just are so passionate about people's superpowers, and it's just oozing all over today. So
I'm ready to start yelling at my city of why on earth, why could we lose such an asset, right? Like for political, I mean, that's outrageous as far as I'm concerned. So,
so now you manage quite a few groups at Orange County. I kind of ran through the resume, I think, and it's like commercial revenues, finance, innovation, operations, maintenance, public affairs. Audience, just stop for a moment in your car, on your walk, whatever, and think about all the different projects and people that are involved at an airport. I mean, really, it's amazing. How do you manage all of those teams?
You have to be a generalist in so many different categories. And a lot of times the history of aviation, it's male dominated. And so they typically came from the military and operations field. There's only about 25-ish women in the United States who actually lead airports. And so there's very few of us. And I came from the business side. And so I'm an anomaly, but when I walked in, the finance team loved me because they were like, she can count.
Yes. She brings a business background. This is so good.
She understands budget, where previous airport directors didn't necessarily understand budget and the business side. So I have to be knowledgeable in IT and security concerns relative to aviation. We have a major capital improvement program. I spent 5 years at an engineering firm. And so understanding construction means and methods, operations, how the planes are landing and taking off, and how do we maintain the airfield, public affairs and government relations. And once a year, I go to DC and visit our congressional delegation and asking, and I'm a shameless beggar, and begging for federal funds for the airport. And because that's my job. And what's the worst thing they can say other than no? And then I also work with TSA, Customs and Border Patrol, many federal agencies, the retail business partners, and we have safety partners here. We have the sheriff's department embedded here. We have the fire department here. And then we have the private aviation. And so you just have to know something about each one of those. And I think for me, that is what really has fascinated me and captured in this industry, just because every single day I get to learn something different. There's always something different going on. And that's what just drives me every single day.
And it seems like, if you're that open as a leader and you're that welcoming and you're forging these one-on-one relationships all along, then when you do have this restroom project that we were talking about before the show, or you do have something with finance or with the sheriffs or with the private airline, you've already developed that relationship. It's like preheat the relationship so that you can be on good terms and get someone to download to you and give you that information. And that brings better collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. And then two, just my personality, like I said, just walking up to people that you've never met before has allowed me to build connections across the United States. So if I encounter a problem here and I need some feedback, I can call someone who has experienced something similar to say, hey, how did you deal with this? Can you share, your lessons learned, and then take that information, see if it fits here, try to apply it. And so it's your networking as well. And so why reinvent the wheel when someone else has already solved that problem? Learn from their experience.
That's so great.
Yeah, it really is. How are you keeping track of all of this? Like, do you use tools, systems? Is it just all in here? Like, how are you doing this?
I'm old school. It's
okay.
It's up here. And and what I'm trying to do as I wind down, my career is that institutional knowledge and sharing my previous experiences and what I have learned, my methodology to others.
Sure. Yeah, that's amazing. We, we obviously Project Insight sponsors the podcast, and we make a project management software. And we're always baffled by how anybody can even keep all that in their mind or Post-it notes or envelopes. We spoke with someone a few weeks ago for the podcast who was a project manager at NASA, and he worked there before there was even computers to do that work, so our brains have gotten dependent on this outside device to really capture all of that.
Yeah, I remember in high school when they first brought in typewriters.
Yes.
And we were all so happy. And then, too, I still remember some of my shorthand. I don't remember all of my shorthand. So,
yeah, like how to write
that
it.
stuff is still back there.
I need my grade school teacher to just beat me up about my penmanship. It's getting terrible. We move too fast. But let's switch to, maybe one more thing before we let you go. Let's talk about just organizational change, right? You've come into so many different companies, groups, airports, teams, cities, whatever it happens to be. And in all of those places, something new has to be accomplished. That's just the nature of work and life and evolution and innovation. And how do you maybe face the newness and deal with the resistance that sometimes comes to that newness, as you try to lead an entire team and cross-functional teams, into this new space?
Yeah. And that's really, really tough. We had to make significant changes here at John Wayne. And so one thing that you learn throughout your career, and my degree is in management, you can't come in being a bull in a china shop, right? Because one, what you have to do, you have to get employees to go along with your vision, right? They have to accept it. And I started off talking about change and where it could move the organization. And what I start doing is going out and doing a lot of the work myself. And once the employees saw the change, not all of them, some of them start buying into it. And then when they came on board, then it just kind of grew and grew and grew. We still have some people hanging on to, I've always done
things.
It this way.
Yeah, old things. Mm-hmm. It worked better.
And you get to a point where when you have enough buy-in, it's like, okay, let's examine our mission, vision, and values. So we went through a whole process and we talked to every single employee. We interviewed them for at least an hour, wanted to understand what they saw for the future of the airport. Because when we first started, they were like, well, Charlene, what's your vision and mission? And I said, no. I said, this is a collective. It would be too easy if I just told you what I thought and then you guys just bought into it. That's not really buying in. It has to come from the bottom up. And so you guys must drive it. And then at the appropriate time, then I'll come in and we'll have conversations and we can polish the mission, vision, and values, but it has to be led by the employees. And so having them develop those values, they own them. And then we can talk about what ownership means for the organization, what accountability means for the organization. And then we start building priorities that we want to achieve within the organization. But it really, really starts at the bottom. You can't dictate from the top up and say, this is what I want the organization to be, because you'll never get the buy-in that you need. You'll never get 100%. So if you're looking for absolute perfection, it's not going to happen. But what you want is enough of the majority, and let the majority then influence the others on the team who may not have bought into it 100%.
For sure. And a quick follow-up to that, because I know our audience is going to want to know, because here you are in this amazing top position at John Wayne International. project managers have to always report up to this leadership, to the C-suite. And it can be daunting to say something, what would you recommend as far as communicating with the C-suite to any project leader? What does the C-suite want to hear, or how can they best transition or reach out to that for the relationship?
So a couple things I learned when I was in their shoes is I would always do my homework on an issue. And so when you go into the C-suite, go with the mindset that you're there to help provide a solution to the problem. So do your homework and then have recommendations and be prepared to discuss them. And it's more like a vetting conversation. Here's what's going on. This is how I think we can solve the problem. And I really appreciate when my employees challenge me, to think of other things that I may not have thought about. And that's what they're there for, to help the organization. And so don't be afraid, find your voice, but always show that you've done your homework. And I always recommend, because the worst thing that can happen, and I've had to tell employees, we don't delegate up, and I've seen that come into the office. Well, here's the problem. You fix it.
You fix it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Get this done for me, please.
Or just make a decision for us, right? Just tell us what to do.
It doesn't work. And if you want to move up in the organization, you have to demonstrate that you can solve problems. And I appreciate if someone comes into my office and maybe they're only 60 or 70% there. It's my job to help you get to the end of the road. So we're going to do it collectively. But I appreciate the fact that you've done all that you can prior to coming into my office and giving me a challenge.
Thank you so much. And actually, thank you so much for being here, for taking time out of, everyone's going to be blaming me on this podcast. How did you get her to take time from all those projects, all the things that are going on? It's just amazing that you had the time to spend with us. And I know our audience has learned so much during this time. We really appreciate you sharing your superpowers of challenging the status quo and being an approachable, present leader, who's really listening and truly committed. Matt, I know you want to say something too.
Just shattering the glass ceilings as well. I've got two little girls that are Phoenician. So thank you so much for setting the expectation of what should be happening in our local government. So that way anyone has that footing that they need, right, as they look to make change in the world, just as you have. So,
well, thank you for that, Matt. And I often joke because next year I turn the big 60. So I've been around for a long time. And I always say I just have one wrinkle across the top of my forehead. And that's from banging my head up against the glass ceiling until it cracked.
That's awesome. I love that.
I love that wrinkle right there.
Let's just title this episode Crack the Glass Ceiling. I think that's what we'll do. It's so good. Oh my goodness. Well, thanks for being with us today, Charlene.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us today on the Wear Your Cape to Work podcast, hosted by Project Insight. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, follow, or leave us a comment. If you subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or other favorite podcast channels, you'll receive notifications of all of our new episodes. We'd also love it if you would share Wear Your Cape to Work with your network of PMPs or anyone else who might enjoy the show. Project Insight is an online project and portfolio management software that helps companies connect project data from across all of their teams and software tools so that they can make confident decisions about their business. Our website is projectinsight.com, and there you can find many resources for project professionals, including free PDU webinars, as well as a place to register for a demonstration or a consultation with one of our success teams. Thank you once again for joining today's conversation, and most importantly, thanks for wearing your cape to work.